So just to summarize, we've been speaking about the Beinoni at the onset of this chapter 12. The Beinoni is really the category of the person that every one of us can and should reach, as opposed to the tzaddik, who's completely righteous and whose evil is maybe either dormant, fully dormant, or non-existent because he's transformed it to the good. Not every one of us can reach the level, but we can reach the level of the Beinoni, which, as explained, is the level in which we do have temptations and inclinations, but as soon as they permeate our mind, we're able to push them off. And therefore, the godly soul is always in control of the animal soul in the for the Beinoni. So that's really the big idea, and we'll continue here. Paragraph in the second paragraph from the top of the page of 290. Does anyone want to read?
I'll read if nobody else doesn't want to.
Okay.
Okay. In chapter 27 of Tanya, the author writes that God creates two types of people and makes different demands on each. Only a few people are given the ability to achieve inner peace and tranquility in their lives, and only they are expected to achieve this. Most people are not granted the possibility, are not required to attain this state, and never will. We are not speaking, of course, of the peace and tranquility a soul gains in the world to come in reward for its labors in this world, regarding which it is said, according to the pain is the gain. Indeed, the Benoni may obtain a greater reward there than the tzaddik because he struggles harder and suffers more pain.
Right. Yeah. So in many ways, the Beinoni in that realm is on a higher level than the tzaddik because, again, he has to face challenges within. And those challenges, the tzaddik doesn't have to face. But because he can face them and overcome them, he reaches a point that the tzaddik cannot reach. The tzaddik is on cruise control, as we've mentioned before. And it's an important point, like we said last week, to remember, because we might become despondent, we might become maybe even sad and depressed because of the challenges that we have. We might even say to ourselves, oh, we still have these temptations, that means we'll never make it. But that's the point. There's no such thing as making it. Every single challenge has to be handled by itself. Every time we overcome a challenge, we actually create, through the self-control, right? We create a light, as the Tanya says, that emanates from us all the way to the upper worlds and brings nachas to God like no tzaddik in the world can bring. Because the tzaddik, again, doesn't have challenges. So when we speak of the world to come, the upper worlds and the reward, we might have greater gain. The Beinoni might have greater gain than the tzaddik because he had challenges and he overcame them, while the tzaddik didn't have those types of challenges. So that in of itself should give strength and encouragement to the Beinoni. But let's continue a little bit more here. The Beinoni is one.
The Benoni is one in whom the struggle between good and evil is constant. Indeed, the moment that there is a lull in the battle, the Benoni must grow alarmed because this is a sure sign that something is amiss. To the Benoni applies the Talmudic rule that one should always incite the good inclination against the evil inclination. For him, the fact that evil is within him against which he must struggle is not a negative sign, but an indication that he is a Benoni, in whom the existence of a struggle is a positive sign.
Right. And in many ways, I want to quote Einstein, who said that something like that. I don't know if I'm quoting verbatim, but he said that giant spirits have almost always been violently opposed by mediocre ones. And in many ways, I think that also speaks to the Beinoni, because the Beinoni has that giant spirit, and therefore he can overcome his animalistic struggles, or his evil inclination, or his animal soul altogether. And the fact that he has that animal soul speaking to him shouldn't faze him, because the animal soul is mediocre. The godly soul is giant. It's godly, comes from God, and it's therefore infinite. So the fact that you have, that the Benoni has these animalistic inclinations means that he's a giant. Otherwise, they would go elsewhere. They will go to someone else. Just like a giant in humankind is often opposed by mediocre spirits, like Einstein says, which is very much true in history. We've seen that no, as they say, no good deed goes unpunished. Every person who creates some type of good is usually opposed by forces. That's the way the world works. Maybe it's embedded in the DNA of creation. But it's true for the individual too, that every time you want to do good, there's some opposition within. But we shouldn't be fazed by that opposition. Because again, it shows that the good is good. If the good wasn't good, the animal soul wouldn't care. And it would let us do it. We wouldn't have any struggle. But the fact that we're having a struggle means that what we're trying to do is good. What we're trying to do is giant. And therefore, there's a mediocre spirit trying to oppose it. And that's what this is saying here. And that's the idea behind that line from the Talmud. And one should always incite the good inclination against the evil inclination, because the good inclination must remind itself that it's a giant. And that by doing good and by following it, yes, we'll have the challenge from the evil inclination and it will incite it. But again, we shouldn't be faced by it. It's true again for the internal struggles. It's true for greater struggles. I'm sure every one of you here sometimes has tried to do good, whether in the context of your own social networks or even smaller groups. And I'm sure you faced opposition. Because again, that's the way this world works. Every time some good needs to happen, there's evil trying to oppose it. But does that mean that good has to fold and go away? Not at all. It needs to, again, recognize that it's in a struggle here with the evil inclination, but it is called upon to prevail each and every time. And by the way, the greater the good, the more opposition there'll be. In Kabbalistic terms, we find that whenever there is purity, there's always impure forces trying to attack it. I think Jerusalem is one of the great examples. Jerusalem is the holy city, but it's the holiest city, right? But it's also the most contested city in the world. Why? Because wherever there's holiness, there's always forces, mystically and in other ways too, that are trying to oppose it. So if this is true on a global level, on a social level, and certainly true on a personal level, then when I try and entice my good inclination, the evil inclination is not going to remain quiet. It's going to want to fight me. But that doesn't mean I should be faced again by the evil. And in many ways, that struggle, as it says here in chapter 12, never really goes away. The evil inclination will always be there. But the good inclination always has to do its job. And that's really the big idea here of the Benoni and the words of encouragement, the main words of encouragement that we give the Benoni. That it's a life struggle. We recognize that for the Benoni. He'll never reach the level of the tzaddik in which he can say, okay, now I can rest on my laurels because I've conquered evil altogether. He won't reach that level. But on the other hand, every time he comes to that struggle and he's victorious, then he receives a reward that's greater than any reward that tzaddik can receive. And also, again, it emanates light that even the angels, as explained later on in the Tanya, tremble from that light. It's a light that the tzaddik can't really create. And that in of itself really should not only elevate us, but also strengthen us as we deal with these struggles. You know, the Rabbi Steinsaltz would often say that the only place where there's no struggle is cemeteries. There you have no struggles. But in cemeteries, no one wants to be. So if you want to live, you have to have a struggle. And you know, the greater the person, the greater sometimes the struggle. But again, shouldn't face the Benoni. Okay, let's continue. Unless, please speak up. Really, any questions, comments, and so on. But otherwise, let's continue with the next paragraph.
No, okay. The Benoni's godly soul never gives him a moment's rest. Thus, if the Benoni ever experiences peace and tranquility, he must worry that this is coming from the other side. God neither requires nor desires of him to achieve any such peace. He desires the Benoni's struggles and expects him to continue with the struggle throughout his life. Indeed, the state of Benoni is not so much a goal, but a path, the path of every man, the way of life to which everyone can aspire and in which everyone can walk.
Right. I'm reminded of the story with the Kotzker Rebbe. I know we mentioned him last week, but this is a different story. Again, the Kotzker Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern of some 300 years ago was very harsh by just speaking truth. Sometimes truth that was very inconvenient. But he had a student once who came to him and said, Rabbi, I'm having so many struggles, both livelihood and with my family and so on. And it's not causing me to serve God as I would want to serve God. And the Kotzker Rebbe said to him, well, maybe God wants you to serve him specifically through your struggles.
Mm.
The struggles themselves are a type of service of God. And every time we overcome those little struggles, we serve God more than we can serve God if we had complete tranquility. In many ways, that's why the Talmud says quite powerfully that that one should be careful or cognizant of the children of the poor, because Torah will come from them. Torah won't come from the people who are living in luxury and have no worries in their minds, and everything's on cruise control. Torah doesn't come from a place like that. Torah comes from the children of the poor. Now, why, you may ask? That's what the Talmud states again. Why? Why does it come from the poor? Because they have to fight for it. And when you have to fight for something, you earn that something. If you don't have to fight for it, you don't really earn. You know, it's like the story in Russia. My father-in-law, who's Russian, loves the story about someone, a little child, who saw an elderly man in Russia walking in the streets of Moscow, and he sees him with all these medals from all the different wars. And he asked him, wow, how do you get those medals? They look so impressive and distinguished. He said, I fought wars. That's how I earned them. And the little child the next day went to the store and bought those medals. And he started walking around with them. And then the old man saw him. And he says to the child, wow, you have the same medals. Did you fight those wars? No, he says, I bought them. So the older man says to him, if that's the case, yours are worth 0, mine are worth millions. And it's true. It's very true. It's specifically through those struggles that we earn medals. So when the children of the poor who struggle, because they have to be working in order to provide food for their families, and they have so many worries on their minds, but yet they find the time to study Torah and overcome the struggle and do mitzvahs and so on, then we say, oh, mehem tetzeh Torah, true Torah comes from them. It's true for Torah study, it's true for anything. Every time we follow a good inclination, in spite of the challenges, or maybe thanks to the challenges, then we can achieve that which the people without any worries can't achieve. That's the greatest benefit the Beinoni has, if you think about it. In many ways, therefore, it's better to be a Beinoni than a tzaddik, because you can produce medals, real medals. You can earn them. So instead, I often say to people who say to me, Rabbi, give me a blessing because I'm stressed. I think stress is good.
Yeah.
I mean, not too much, I understand. But stress is what makes us grow. Imagine you would have no stress. You wouldn't grow. In many ways, it's true for challenges. Now, of course, we don't wish challenges on ourselves and on anyone. When challenges come, like it comes every day for the Benoni, especially the challenges within, we have to embrace them. That's what makes us earn those medals. Let's remember that. So yes, you can go buy medals and think that you can go sit on the beach and convince yourself that you're living in some type of tranquility. But is that a life worth living? Not sure. Okay,
Rabbi, I would say
Yeah.
most parents want to remove challenges from their children, make it easier for them to have a good education,
Right.
not to live in poverty, to have less challenges so that they could accomplish more.
It's true, but that's where parents, I think, need to find that healthy balance. Because sometimes parents do have the power to remove all challenges. But I think good parents would say, you know what, I'm going to leave a few challenges for my son. Otherwise, you'll never grow. You'll never earn that medal of life, to use that analogy. So parents have to play that game of finding the right balance between, imagine a parent that gives everything to his child. I know none of you are like that, but seriously, imagine everything. I'll tell you this, I'll never forget this. One of the most striking meetings I had right here in my office was with just a terrible story with and don't start thinking, oh, maybe it's him. You don't know the person. But with a father who had a teenage boy, and he got divorced, and he remarried, or at least he was going out at that stage. Now he remarried, but going out with this woman, and this woman didn't like him, didn't like the son of this father. So the father and the son came to my office, and the father's not understanding his son. I said, why? He said, because, look, I know that he doesn't like my newfound woman, but I've gave him everything. I gave him an apartment to live in. I gave him a credit card he can swipe whenever he wants. I gave him a brand new car. I gave him everything. I said to him, look, just whatever you need, I'll give you. Just please don't come to our house because my new lady doesn't like you. And he couldn't understand his son. And his son was in the office and he said, Dad, don't you understand? I don't care about your cars. I don't care about your this. I don't care about my apartment. I want a relationship with you. Gave me everything, but you gave me nothing. In many ways, sometimes we try and we suffocate our children with everything. But we miss the point completely. That's true in that context. That's an extreme example. But it's true in other contexts. If I help my son with homework all the time and I do the homework for him, did I help him? No, let me give him the challenge of homework. It's finding that balance. And I think that's what God does in many ways with the Benoni, with all of us. He doesn't give us struggles in order for us to suffer. He gives us struggles in order for us to earn the medals of life. I think we've mentioned it, but it's worth mentioning it again. That's again, back to the Kotzker Rebbe. That's his interpretation of the punishment that the snake received at the onset of creation. We all know the story about how the snake seduced Eve and Adam to eat from the forbidden tree, from the tree of knowledge. And they were each punished. How was the snake punished? God says to the snake that that now your feet will be cut off and you'll have a body that will slide on the dust, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. Quoting word for word. And the Kotzker Rebbe asks the question, doesn't make sense. That's not a punishment. God is basically saying to the snake, I'll give you whatever you want. Your livelihood will be there for you. will be readily available for you at all times. Is that a punishment? It's like you can have an open bank account. Imagine that. You have no financial worries. Whenever you want, go to the ATM, go and slide this credit. God covers it. Is that a punishment? But the answer, according to the Kotzker Rebbe, is that that's the worst punishment. Because when God tells you, I'll give you anything you want, but I don't want to have a relationship with you anymore. That's the worst punishment. And in many ways, struggles is God's way of saying, I want to have a relationship with you. And therefore, I won't give you anything and everything you want. Let's work on life together. I'll do my job, God says, and I'll come to your rescue when you need to. I'll help you with your homework when you need to. But you got to do your job too. And through doing those jobs, through overcoming your struggles, you will start earning the medals of life. In many ways, really, that's the power of the Beinoni, the power that he has over the tzaddik. Because the tzaddik doesn't have those struggles. He has maybe other struggles, but he doesn't have those inner struggles, which are the greater struggles. But it's God's way of saying to us, I love you. And therefore, I'll make you struggle a little bit. I won't treat you like the snake. Yeah. That doesn't mean that we have to accept all those struggles. We can sometimes say to God, okay, it's too much. Fine. I do need help with my homework now. I mean, come on. Been doing homework every night by myself. Help me out here. I have a question that's inexplicable, unsolvable. But okay. Let's continue. Bottom of 290. Unless, again, please, other questions, comments? Okay, let's continue. Such is the Beinoni's inner state.
Such is the Beinoni's inner state every moment of his life, except at specific times, such as during the recital of the Shema or prayer, which is a time when the divine intellect is in the state of ascendancy above. The
Right.
set time for reciting the Shema or for prayer is a time of ascendancy of the intellect, mochin de gadlut, in the supernal worlds, meaning that the divine attributes of the Chochmah, Bina, and Dat, the three intellectual attributes among the 10 divine attributes, Sifrot, that define God's involvement with our reality, manifest themselves in their uttermost radiance and potency. In contrast, there are times of diminution of the intellect, mochin de kanut, in which their manifest effect of the supernal Chabad is partial and dimmed, connoting a state of reduced consciousness and perception at all levels of creation.
Right. Let's explain these two very strong Kabbalistic and very important Kabbalistic terms. That's what's called mochin de katnut and mochin de gadlut, which means, as explained here, diminution of the intellect and then expansion of the intellect. Now, we each experience those two modes, I think maybe multiple times during the day. Sometimes we feel like, sometimes it could happen in the morning. We just awoke and we had a coffee, maybe not before the coffee, but after we had a coffee, we feel like we can conquer the world and we start thinking big. Our consciousness is elevated. That's a state of mochin de gadlut. But then sometimes we feel down, we feel overcome by the challenges of life, and we feel stressed, and we feel like we can't do anything. That's mochin de katnut. So we experience those two modes. And that's really in short. When we pray, there are also those levels. Maybe at the onset of prayer, we're still not completely immersed in prayer. We're still not completely connected to God, which is really the purpose of prayer. So we have this mode of mochin de katnut, where our mind is diminished a little. It's strained. But then as we evolve in prayer and as we connect to God and as God connects to us, we become expanded. That climax of expansion is on during the Shema and Amidah. During the Shema prayer, then we feel like, okay, we of so connected that we've become godly in many ways. That's mochin de gadlut. So when we're on that level, then we're above struggle. And therefore, the struggle of the Benoni doesn't really relate to that level, because it's got this expansion of godliness where struggles are either non-existent, or they're too little, or they seem minute for us because we're so expanded. So that's what the Tanya says. Most of the time, yes, the struggle of the Benoni is preeminent. But sometimes, like during the Shema prayer, when we have this expansion of godliness and of consciousness, then that struggle doesn't quite exist. That's really to explain that mystical term. Okay, we'll continue next week. I have to go to Minyan, but Shavua Tov, everybody. We should only hear good news. And we can say to God, enough with the struggles. I think He's given us enough. We need Mashiach now. The time has come.
Absolutely.
You know, back in the day, they would say, we want Mashiach now. I think now we can say we need Mashiach now. It's enough.